It's no fun when our kids are sick, but we may just have found the silver lining. Apple and raspberry and orange flavoured electrolyte slushies made by Rehydrate.
Rehydrate slushies are a tasty way to get essential electrolytes into our little ones when they're dehydrated from sickness or even just the Aussie heat. They're delicious and they'll help your little ones feel better in no time. Grab Rehydrate from Coles today.
When I think about my place as a parent and I think about those two words, help or hurt, I want to be the helpful parent. I want to be the parent that is able to guide and direct, not hurt.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now.
You know, I think that if I was to rate the most often asked question I'm given when it comes to raising kids, discipline would be the number one question. How do I get my kids to do as they're told? How do I get my kids to listen? What do I do to my kids when they don't do the right thing? It's just all about discipline. It's the thing that drives parents bonkers.
Yeah, I think we're all waiting for that ready-made manual that tells us how to do it all.
It's so that our kids will be perfect.
Because every moment is different, right? Every child is different, and the way we deal with each child in different situations is different. It's really challenging.
Yeah, in fact, the most watched video that I've ever been involved in was on Goldcast. I think there's been something like 78 million people watch the video, and it's really a story about how to discipline a child. That's what everyone loved about it. Everyone wanted to know how to do it, and they liked the compassion that was behind the discipline. Oh, by the way, my name is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the author of 6 books about raising happy families. I'm here with my wife and co-host, Mrs. Happy Families, Kylie, mum to our 6 daughters.
Tonight you're talking about the do's and don'ts of discipline. And there is so much in this.
So just a quick heads up for people who are not aware of this. Every single month we do a webinar. We charge $30 for the webinar and we give you the very best, the latest science, the most practical techniques about how you can work with your kids to make your family happier. So obviously this one's all about discipline. Let's talk about that in a sec. But for people who want to know a bit more, we have this thing called a Happy Families membership. And instead of paying $30 to watch the webinar, you pay either $12 a month or $17 a month, and you get the webinar and so many other things to make your family happier. Like the resource list is as long as your arm. So if you would like to attend the webinar, we'd love to have you there. That's tonight. But if you would like to have ongoing monthly support, jump onto the Happy Families website, happyfamilies.com.au, and check out the Happy Families membership, because that way you get all of the webinars and you get them for a fraction of the price of what you pay for them normally. Plus you get all those other resources. Anyway, that's the shameless plug for the membership, which I love and which we've got a very large family who are now part of that, and I love the fact that we get to help them. Let's talk about tonight's webinar.
Well, I've had a little bit of a sneak peek at your presentation tonight. And
not a sneak peek. You've read the presentation inside and out.
I don't even know where to start. There is so much information in here, and I wish that we could tell everybody about all of it.
Can you start with I got a message from somebody about the do's and don'ts of discipline webinar for tonight. And can we just talk about that for a second? Not that I'm into parent shaming, okay, because I don't want to make people feel like they should be ashamed, but some people, right?
Well, this comment that came through floored me. I actually wondered whether it was real. I had to ask you. She just said, if people don't know how to raise a child without being taught, I would suggest they rethink before they breed.
Because everybody knows how to raise children before they have them, right? I love that. It's kind of like saying, if you don't know how to operate before you become a doctor, then don't even bother becoming one. So some people are discouraging their friends from participating in the do's and don'ts of discipline. We've actually got had a great conversation with a mate of mine, a mutual friend, Tim, who had some friends come over to his place and they were admiring the bookshelf because, you know, the bookshelf is a bit of a status symbol in the home. People come over and look at the kind of books you read. They're like, oh, yes, you are.
I don't know if it's so much a status symbol, but it can give you a very good insight.
Yeah, it shows you who you're really talking to, doesn't it? And so these people were looking at Tim's bookshelf and they've said to Tim and Marianne, you guys have got all these parenting books on your bookshelf. What have you got them for? You're already such great parents. And he just kind of looked at them like, yeah, it kind of goes the other way around. Actually, we've read the books and that's why we're doing okay as parents. Anyway, let's talk about this webinar because I want to help everyone to be a better parent when it comes to discipline and their kids.
Well, I guess the first question I've got for you, Justin, is, you know, what is this? What is discipline, and how does it impact the way we interact with our children in tough moments?
I love this question because there's a fundamental flaw in the way people understand discipline, not just in Australia, but I think in Western society generally. When we think about disciplining kids, we usually think about getting them in trouble for doing stuff wrong. Like that's just the standard answer. Discipline means getting kids in trouble. I'm often asked to appear in the media to talk about whether or not it's okay to discipline other people's kids. And what the question really is if somebody's child does something I don't like, can I get them in trouble, and how can I get them in trouble? It's that kind of thing. But that's not what discipline means. It kind of does. If you look at today's dictionary, discipline just has one word beside it, punish or punishment. But if you look at older dictionaries from back when the word was invented, discipline actually comes from the Latin disciples, which means to teach or to guide, to show the way. And I think if we think about discipline that way, discipline's about showing the way. When our children make mistakes, when our children behave in challenging ways, when our children lose the plot, they don't need us to punish them. Like if I was to distill the word punishment down to one very simple word, it would be hurt. When you punish someone, you make them pay a price. You exact retribution. You've done the wrong thing, and here's how it's going to hurt you. Punishment is all about hurting. But discipline, showing the way, teaching and guiding and instructing, that's all about helping.
Yeah, when I think about my place as a parent and I think about those two words, help or hurt, I want to be the helpful parent. I want to be the parent that, is able to guide and direct, not hurt and dish out consequences.
Yeah, and consequences is just another word for punishment. Like people are like, I don't want to punish them, but there does need to be consequences. And I'm like, well, it's kind of the same thing. It's a euphemistic, soft way of saying, I don't want to hurt them, but I'm going to have to hurt them. I've got to hurt them. They've done the wrong thing. So I reckon, why don't we spend a few minutes in just a sec unpacking some of the do's and don'ts of discipline to give people a taste of what we're going to talk about tonight.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
For a happier family, try a Happy Families membership, because a happy family doesn't just happen. Details at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, and we are talking about the do's and don'ts of discipline. Now, obviously, you've got a list here of do's and don'ts. Let's unpack a few of those.
Okay, I think we should dive into them. When you looked at the list, what intrigued you the most? Because you've heard me talk about this sort of stuff for years.
The one that stood out to me the most, like literally the very first one that I just love, and going back to that hurt or helpful parent, I want to be the helpful parent. The idea that children are people too.
Yeah. So we kind of forget sometimes that children are people. We just think that they're robots, that they should do what they're told when they're told. And when they don't, we kind of become agitated and irritated. It's like, no, I told you to do something, so just do it. We forget that they've got feelings, that they've got hopes and dreams, that they've got preferences, that they're in the middle of their favourite show ever. And I know it's always their favourite show ever, every single time. Doesn't matter what show it is. Like, but this is the best episode. It's my favourite show. But every now and again, it just helps if we can step into their shoes and see the world through their eyes. Remember what it was like to be little and to have this big person always bossing them.
Yeah, when I was growing up, there was, it was this whole idea of children are supposed to be seen but not heard. And I love this concept that children are people too, because I feel like it tells me that we're evolving as individuals and as parents.
Yeah, so Dr. Louise Porter actually wrote a book called Children Are People Too, and it's a beautiful book. I really, really recommend it. And it talks about just this issue that we forget. I mean, how many of us can really remember what it was like to be 4 or even to be 14 and what our hopes and our desires and our preferences were then? But the more we can step into and remember that, the more likely it is that as parents, we're going to be more compassionate and more helpful in the way we discipline our kids. That is, the way we teach them, the way we show them the way.
I guess the next one that taps into that beautifully is that people matter, things don't.
Oh, so my favourite, I'm going to share this story in the webinar. So if you're watching the webinar and you've listened to the podcast, spoiler alert, just letting you know. So some years ago, one of our kids went to a conference. She came back from the conference and told us this story, and it was amazing, so amazing that I got in touch with the guy that was involved in the story and got permission to be able to share the story myself and let everyone know about it, because it was such a beautiful story. So this guy works for a major software company in the United States, had to go and present a conference interstate, and for whatever reason, something went wrong with his laptop. His laptop completely died. The shops were closing. He didn't have time to go and buy a new laptop. And even if he had time to go and buy a new laptop, he wasn't going to have time to, set it up, put all of his programs on it and all that kind of thing. This was back before we did everything in the cloud. So, we've got to go back a few years for this. Anyway, he is desperate, doesn't know what to do, and then thinks, I know, I'll see if the neighbour's got a spare laptop. Well, it so happens that the neighbour had just bought a brand new one that week, had just finished setting it up. It was literally brand new out of the box, just set up, literally hadn't used it himself at all, and said, you know what? I'll just keep using mine for another few days. You take my brand new one because then you won't have any problems. Take it to the conference, use it. When you come back, I'll grab it off you then. So this guy says, thanks so much. That's amazing. He borrows the laptop. He loads all of his programs on there. He's got it all set to go, flies away, does the conference, comes back late at night, crashes out. The next morning, he comes into the kitchen. And of course, the first thing that he's going to do that day is drop the laptop back to the neighbor and say, thank you so much. But when he walks into the kitchen, he sees his son doing something he's not supposed to be doing. His little, I think, 4-year-old son is riding his skateboard around the kitchen bench, around the kitchen island sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, hey, son, you're not allowed to do that. What are you riding a skateboard? And then he's like, hang on, we don't have a skateboard.
Oh, no.
And he looks down and his son has gotten the brand new laptop and, screen down, keyboard down. He's skating around the kitchen bench on the brand new laptop. And so, this guy's just freaking out. He's thinking, number one, this is so embarrassing. Number two, he's destroyed the laptop. Number three, we don't really have the money to be buying a new laptop to replace somebody's brand new laptop because I've already got to buy my own new one anyway. And so he's freaking out.
This is a disaster waiting to happen.
Massive problem. And as you can imagine, the 4-year-old copped his wrath, right? Like this did not go well for the 4-year-old. He's like, what are you doing? And he was trying to be nice to the 4-year-old, but he wasn't nice to the 4-year-old. It didn't go well at all. So then he's kind of going through this thing, what do I do about the laptop? So he just doesn't go back to the neighbour. He just hangs onto the laptop for a day and then 2 days and then 3 days.
Neighbours have stopped talking over less than this.
Yeah,
like this is
serious. And finally, one day he's out the front and he'd been avoiding the neighbour completely, but the neighbour drives into the driveway while he's out in the front yard and he's like, oh no, he's seen me. And so he gives him a wave and then he goes inside.
Oh, gosh.
And about 30 seconds later, there's sort of this there's a knock on the door and he's like, oh, what am I going to do? And the neighbour's standing there smiling and says, hey, how you doing? And he says, I'm good. And he says, so I've noticed you've been avoiding me lately. Like the neighbour's just so upfront about it. And he goes, no, I haven't really been avoiding you. I've just been really busy. And he says, oh, okay, no problem. I thought you might have been avoiding me because maybe something's happened to the laptop. Like he's just called it, just said it straight up. And so obviously the guy goes, oh, yeah, well, about the laptop. And so he tells him what happens. And he's expecting this frustration. He's expecting maybe even an eruption. He's like, I've really blown it. The neighbour looks at him and says, well, I hope you didn't get your son in too much trouble. And he's like, I beg your pardon?
Oh, my goodness.
He says, people matter, things don't.
Oh,
isn't that a great story? And I think that if we can remember that, like our kids aren't trying to break the vase. They're not trying to put a hole in. Well, I mean, every now and again in anger, maybe they do the wrong thing. But if they do the wrong thing intentionally out of anger, then they matter even more because they're struggling that much. People matter, not things. So that's just a taste of what we're going to talk about. I mean, I could talk for ages and ages and ages, but clearly we don't have time for the whole webinar right now. But that's happening tonight, the do's and don'ts of discipline. And if you can make it, it would be awesome to have you there. If you miss it, you can buy it in the Happy Families shop because not everybody listens to the podcast the day that we put it out there, obviously. But it would be so cool to have you as part of the Happy Families membership so that you can participate in all of the webinars where I tell all of those stories. And I think I've got about another 10 do's and don'ts of discipline that we're going to talk about tonight.
So many.
Can't wait for it. So glad you gave me the chance to tell that story on the spot. I love it. Hey, if you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to tell everybody about it by jumping onto Apple Podcasts and leaving a rating and a review. Those 5-star ratings and all of your reviews help other people to find out about the podcast and make their families happier, to help their kids know that people matter, things don't. or at least that people matter more than things, because things kind of matter a little bit sometimes. If you can leave that rating and review, we can help other families be happier. Thank you so much to Justin Rulon from Bridge Media for producing the podcast, and to our executive producer, Craig Bruce. If you'd like more info about how to make your family flourish, and especially our Happy Families memberships, you can get all the info at happyfamilies.com.au.